won't be fooled. We're breaking through, breaking through. Their propaganda we can see right through. We're waking up, ain't nothing they can do. They lied to you.
Have you ever wondered about the role religious heads play in interpreting the Quran? This question, my friends, is not just an idle curiosity. It's a question that goes to the heart of how millions of people understand and practice their faith. It's a position of great authority and even greater responsibility. Followers place their trust in these religious heads, believing that they are being guided along the right path. They look to them for answers, for guidance, for reassurance. They trust them to provide accurate, unbiased interpretations of the Quran's teachings. But throughout the years, they have misleaded many people and made other books and rules other than the Quran. We will look at their history and what they have done before in the Quran. We will look at how they have misleaded billions in the world today. In 378 AD, God says, "There are some among them who twist their tongues when quoting from the book, so that you might think that what they say is from the book when it is not. They say that it is from God when it is not from God. Thus they deliberately lie about God. It is inconceivable that any person to whom God had given the book and wisdom and prophethood would ask the people to be their servants rather than God's. On the contrary, they would say, 'Be devoted worshippers of God in accordance to what is in the book you have been teaching and reading.' And they would never ask you to take angels or prophets as lords, and they would never ask you to be disbelievers after you had devoted yourself to God." As we see in this verse, they were always making up rules and lies at those times, and made people to serve them. And in 9:31-34, God says, "They have taken their rabbis and monks as well as the Messiah, son of Mary, as lords besides Allah, even though they were commanded to worship none but one God. There is no God worthy of worship except Him. Glorified is He above what they associate with Him, O believers. Indeed, many rabbis and monks consume people's wealth wrongfully and hinder others from the way of Allah. Give good news of a painful torment to those who hoard gold and silver and do not spend it in Allah's cause." This verse also proves they were always consuming people's wealth. They still do today. They own the best houses and live well. So, what happens when the interpretation of the Quran is left solely in the hands of these evil men? What happens when followers place all their trust in these individuals without questioning or seeking to understand for themselves? The Quran is a guide for life, a blueprint for ethical and moral living. But if its interpretation is monopolized by a select few, does it not risk becoming a tool for control rather than enlightenment? The Quran holds a unique perspective on religious heads and their interpretations. When we delve into the verses of the Quran, we find a compelling narrative regarding religious heads and their roles in interpreting the holy text. Where some might see them as infallible, the Quran seems to suggest otherwise. In the Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 213, it is stated, "Mankind was one single nation, and Allah sent messengers with glad tidings and warnings, and with them He sent the book and truth to judge between people in matters wherein they differed." Here, the Quran acknowledges the role of religious heads as interpreters of divine word, emphasizing their duty to guide and bring clarity to the people. However, the Quran also cautions against blind faith in these religious heads. In Surah Al-Tawbah, verse 31, we find, "They have taken their scholars and monks as lords besides Allah." This verse is a clear warning against idolizing religious heads and replacing the divine authority of Allah with their interpretations. This perspective is further emphasized in Surah Al-Imran, verse 79, which says, "It is not for a human that Allah should give him the scripture and authority and prophethood, and then He would say to the people, 'Be servants to me rather than Allah.'" Here, the Quran underscores that religious heads should lead people towards Allah, not towards themselves. There's also an intriguing verse in Surah Al-An'am, verse 114, stating, "Shall I seek other than Allah for judge, when He it is who hath revealed unto you this scripture fully explained?" This verse implies that the Quran itself is the ultimate source of interpretation, suggesting that religious heads must always align their interpretations with the text's inherent wisdom. As we can see, the Quran holds religious heads to a high standard, but also warns of potential misuse. It paints a picture of them as guides and interpreters, but also cautions the believers not to lose sight of the ultimate authority, the divine word of Allah itself. Misinterpretation of religious texts can lead to significant consequences. This is especially true when it comes to religious heads interpreting the Quran. They carry a weighty responsibility as their interpretations guide the spiritual direction of countless followers. Let's take a moment to consider the potential consequences of misinterpretation. When a verse is misunderstood or taken out of context, it can lead down a path of confusion and misguidance. This can result in skewed beliefs, impractical practices, or even harmful actions, all done in the name of faith. For instance, consider the often misinterpreted verse, "And fight in the way of Allah those who fight you." Taken out of context, this verse could be used to justify unprovoked aggression. However, when read in its entirety and with a proper understanding of its historical background, it becomes clear that it refers to self-defense in a specific context, not indiscriminate violence. Another commonly misunderstood verse is, "And men are a degree above women." Some scholars interpret this as a blanket statement of male superiority. Yet, when studied deeply, it refers to the responsibility men have to provide for their families, not a statement about gender hierarchy. And finally, the verse 24:31, God says, "Let them draw their veils over their chests," is clear that the thing to hide are the breast. Yet they misinterpret this as covering the head and is completely false. These examples clearly show how misinterpretations of those men have led to confusion and misguidance of billions of people in the world. It's a reminder that the Quran, like any profound text, requires careful and thoughtful reading. The Quran itself provides guidance on how to avoid misinterpretation. It encourages followers to use their intellect, seek knowledge, and understand context. The Quran also advises consulting multiple sources of wisdom, not relying solely on a single religious head's interpretation. But the most significant safeguard against misinterpretation is the Quran's emphasis on reflection and contemplation. It repeatedly asks its readers to ponder its verses deeply, understanding that true comprehension comes from the heart and mind working together. Misinterpretations can lead to confusion and misguidance, but the Quran provides guidance on how to avoid this. It's a call to all of us to approach the Quran with an open mind, a thoughtful heart, and a sincere desire for truth. The Quran encourages personal understanding and interpretation. This statement rings true and resonates deeply within the pages of the Holy Book. Let's delve into this concept and see how the Quran fosters this idea of personal understanding. In the Quran, there are numerous instances where individuals are encouraged to seek knowledge and understanding. For instance, in Surah Al-Zumar, it is mentioned that God has revealed the most beautiful message in the form of a book, consistent with itself, repeating, "The skins of those who fear their Lord shiver from it. Then their skin and their hearts soften to the remembrance of God." This verse and many others emphasize the importance of personal understanding. The Quran is a guide, a beacon of light, but it requires the individual to seek, explore, and understand its teachings. It's not just about reading the Quran, but about contemplating its messages and applying them in our daily lives. In 6:116, God says, "If you obey the majority of people on earth, they will divert you from the path of God. They follow only conjecture. They only guess." 103:106. Most people, no matter what you do, will not believe. The majority of those who believe in God do not do so without committing idol worship. In this verse is clear that we should not follow the majority. The Quran promotes thinking for yourself. It's your journey. You need to read the map, follow the path, make the discoveries. It's a journey of personal enlightenment where you are encouraged to seek knowledge, to question, to ponder, to understand. The Quran, in its wisdom, does not just hand us answers on a silver platter. It encourages us to seek them, to strive for understanding and knowledge. So, let's remember, the Quran promotes to think and remember. Only Allah can teach you the Quran. It's a journey of discovery, a journey of understanding, a journey that each one of us must undertake. In summary, the Quran provides a unique perspective on religious heads and their role in interpretation. Throughout our exploration, we've seen how the sacred text raises questions about the authority of religious leaders, emphasizing the importance of personal understanding and interpretation. The religious heads of today are evil. They are not here to guide, but to mislead. They dictate to the people other books, written 200 years after the Prophet, and they even twist the verses of the Quran. But in the end, the Quran encourages us to seek knowledge. It tells us it's complete, And as for mankind, our job is to understand and interpret while being mindful of the guidance of Allah, because He guides whom He wills. Please share this. Thank you.